Thank you to Manscaped for sponsoring this video. Alcohol. It's something we all love to drink, be it after a rough day of work, after a bad breakup, or just for the hell of it. Alcoholics don't run my life, they drive. And everyone has stories about getting pissed drunk and waking up in the middle of nowhere and then subsequently embarking on the long walk of shame back home with all their money and dignity gone. And although no good story ever starts with a salad, but instead almost exclusively with a few glasses of beer, there is a dark side to it. In the Balkans in particular, alcohol is a huge part of the culture, for better or worse, and it has played a major role in developing the region to what it is today. But how exactly did it do that, and what is the role of alcohol in the Balkans? To understand this deep-seated, culturally ingrained love of the drink, we have to go way back to the dawn of humanity itself.
Only booga we do is ooga booga boo. Ooga booga 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 boo.
For the entirety of humanity's existence, we've loved getting drunk, and there's growing evidence for the theory that the reason agriculture was developed was so it'd be less work for us to get ourselves drunk whenever we want to. If you've ever spent more time than an hour in the Balkans, this theory will seem incredibly obvious. In fact, it's entirely likely that the Balkans is one of the first places wine grapes were properly cultivated in Europe, with proper evidence for wine production itself in Greece 6,500 years ago. The Romans built upon the Greeks' knowledge and continued this cultivation by planting their own varietals of grapes wherever they could. During the Great Migration in the 6th century, the Slavic tribes moving in further cemented the importance of wine to the region, as the formerly pagan Slavs were influenced by the Byzantine Empire to convert to Christianity. They needed a steady supply of Christ's blood to consume along with his flesh, aka bread, for communion rituals. As wine takes a very time and labor-intensive method to produce, this meant monasteries had to source wine from cultivated vineyards. Both the churches and monasteries themselves got into the action, and over time each country cultivated many of their own unique regional varieties, many of which can't grow anywhere else but their home turf. While beer and various honey-based meads were also popular, the drink of choice for hundreds of years remained wine. Then, in the mid-1300s, the Ottomans started moving into the Balkans, and within less than 200 years, the Balkan Peninsula was mostly under their control. Being Muslim, the Turks weren't so keen on alcohol production, and weren't so keen to preserve the Christians' fondness of alcohol. But to the Christians, wine was unnegotiable, as the importance of wine in Christianity really cannot be understated. In the Bible, everyone drank it, with meals and especially among friends, as a way to cement alliances between believers. Jesus himself had such a strong love of wine that his accusers even called him a fat drunk. Wine was also an essential part of worship in both the Old and New Testaments, being offered to God as sacrifice, and it kept a permanent presence in temples of worship. It was in so much of God's special favor that upon joining the kingdom of God after death, according to Isaiah 25:6, you would be greeted with an abundance of wine. Most crucially, wine played a major role in the Last Supper, the last time Jesus ate with his disciples before being arrested. Jesus held up a glass of wine and told his followers to drink from it, as it is a cup of his blood, and that his blood would be shed so that all of humanity's sins would be forgiven. Along with consuming bread to represent his body, this ritual became known as the Eucharist. This ritual was the oldest and most distinctive form of Christian worship, and it celebrated the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus, and helped secure the eternal salvation of your soul. Mom, I think you've had enough to drink for tonight.
Nonsense, Vlad! Mommy is securing her eternal salvation!
The Ottomans, on the other hand, didn't really see it that way, and instead found it to be rather creepy, and decided to stamp out this weird ritualized cannibalism by prohibiting mass alcohol production. They even created special troops with the singular task to seek out and destroy vineyards, only allowing certain churches and monasteries to continue their production for church ritual purposes. As wine grapes require a bit of space and care to grow, it really couldn't be done in secret, and so the Ottomans decimated wine production in the Balkans. Coupled with this was a 17th century onset of the Little Ice Age, when Europe's climate became colder and wetter. So in addition to the Turks being antisocial killjoys, climate-wise, much of the Balkans was now unsuitable for growing wine on mass scale, and production went way down. However, instead of the intended side effect of making haram cannibal blood juice extinct, the Ottomans' efforts actually had the opposite effect. Alcohol, wine in particular, now became integral to the preservation of the Balkan Christian identity, as it became intrinsically tied to dutiful Christian opposition to the Turks' foreign occupation. The Turks did everything they could to Turkify the locals. While Christians, like Jews, were people of the book, like Muslims, they weren't seen as equal under the law and had to pay a special jizya tax to the state. Most horribly, the Ottomans had the devshirme practice of seizing the children of Christians, forcibly converting them, and forcing them to work in the empire, which did nothing but create massive resentment among the populace, who saw it as targeted religious discrimination, as Muslims were exempt from having their children kidnapped. While technically Christians were allowed to practice their faith, in practice, however, the church was often used as a hostage, as in, obey us or we'll destroy your churches and monasteries and publicly burn your saints as relics to ash. Which is something the Serbs found out firsthand after the Banat uprising in the late 1500s, in which they used the image of Saint Sava, the founder of the Serbian Orthodox Church, on their flags in battle as a symbol of their resistance. In response, the Sultan ordered Saint Sava's relics to be burned in order to suppress future rebellions and demoralize the Serbs. Unsurprisingly, this had the exact opposite effect, and instead, the Serbs' resolve to preserve their national and thus religious identity only intensified. And the story is basically the same throughout all the Balkan Christian regions. As the Christian communities turned to the local churches to preserve and perpetuate their local traditions and culture, wine production for the Eucharist became a fundamental pillar of the cultural boundary between the Christians, us, versus the Muslim, them. And as the Balkans steadily fell more and more to Ottoman control, the Christian church's centralized cultivation of wine became more and more central to the preservation of the Christian identity, in spite of the onslaught of the Muslim hordes trying to destroy the Christian way of life. Because while they may take our money, our saints, even our children, they at least can't take away the salvation of our souls. But even so, alcoholism is bad, okay? You should always take care of your body. And there's no better way to do so other than with Manscaped, baby! You all knew it was only a question of time when I too will start talking about shaving myself down there. And there's a goddamn good reason for it, because Manscaped's Performance Package 5.0 Ultra is more than worth it. What's the big deal? Well, because Manscaped now has the latest performance package, which is the ultimate men's grooming kit that features none other than the Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra Electric Trimmer, created with the finest of blade technology, waterproofed and enriched with LED lights, and a dual temperature feature. This bad boy can trim even the wildest of bushes in the hardest to reach of areas with ease and no cuts, while leaving nothing but the smoothest of skin behind. The package also comes with an upgraded trimmer blade and interchangeable foil blade for enhanced performance. But that's not all. In it is also the Weed Whacker 2.0, with which you can say goodbye to your girlfriend's tweezers and trim your nose hairs like a real man, with style. And when you're done trimming, you then also have the Crop Soother and Crop Preserver, so you can be as smooth as a newborn baby while feeling cool and comfortable and smelling better than Ryan Gosling after a morning run. So what are you waiting for? Head over to manscaped.com and get your hands on the Performance Package 5.0 Ultra today. When you use my promo code in Europe, you'll get 20% off plus free international shipping plus 2 free gifts. So go over to Manscaped right now and get your ultimate grooming kit today. The Ottomans' efforts to stamp out wine production combined with little ice age weather meant it wasn't always easy or cheap to obtain wine for personal use. Luckily, however, by the 17th century, something was ready to take its place. It turned out that in this new colder, damper weather, plums and other stone fruits grew beautifully, needed far less space to grow than grapevines, and required next to no maintenance. Couple this with the spreading technology of distillation and you get the emergence of distilled plum spirits. Now, this was a far more potent delivery of alcohol than wine could ever hope to be. A single glass of the stuff contained even more alcohol than over an entire bottle of wine, and compared to wine, spirits were far less taxed and far easier to both produce and sell illegally. We're talking about the emergence of Rakia, baby!
Voliš Rakiju? Voliš Rakiju?
Moram da pijem
pijem da zaboravim, ja ne smem trezan tu da boravim. Ja moram da pijem da zaboravim, ja ne smem trezan tu da boravim.
Now, the word Rakia itself is a collective term for fruit brandy made throughout the entire region of the Balkans. Maybe you've heard it called by other names like Pálinka or Țuica, or cognac, or even szlivovitz. Its alcohol content is typically around 40%, but in practice it could be much higher. Cause hey, we're talking about moonshine here, and if you're already gonna make it shine and risk God knows how many years in prison, might as well make it so potent that the fumes make the entire neighborhood go blind. Most commonly, it's made from plums or grapes, but basically any fruit can be used. Apricots, raspberries, mulberries, walnuts, strawberries, peaches, pears, apples, quince, cherries, or even honey. If it's technically an edible substance, a rakia can be made from it. Now, seeing a great deal of Balkan national character was the result of defiance to the Ottoman occupation, especially the trait of rebellious defiance to authority, also known as inat, Rakia quickly rose in the ranks to become inat's strongest soldier. Let's say the local commissioner asks you why you're transporting so many barrels of overripe plums to your friend's shed. Why, it's for jam for winter, you moron! What kind of question even is that? Want us to die from scurvy? Wink wink. Okay, so your children are being stolen and brainwashed to be soldiers in the Sultan's army or concubine slaves in his harem. But at least you can give a middle finger to the Sultan's prohibition on alcohol by, let's say, getting publicly blackout wasted with your friends during Ramadan daylight hours and leaving a massive mess for the Turkish chuds to clean up. Or you can secretly brew rakia on your property and pass it around to your neighbors, or even sneak it to the Janissary soldiers themselves so they'd become drunk, disorderly, and disobedient to their masters. And you could use the local taverns as essentially covers for secret meetings of local resistance where you and your neighbors could discuss any and all plans of rebellion. Now, granted, this social and cultural embrace of the power of Christ being infused in these shots could be taken to pretty ridiculous extremes at times, and Serbia in particular often elevated it to an art form, which shouldn't be surprising seeing as how massive the role of resistance to Ottoman imperialism was to the formation and preservation of the Serbian cultural identity. Obviously, solely from its principal protest to be free from Istanbul's chains, by the 19th century the average Serbian adult was consuming about 39 liters of pure alcohol per year, which is the amount of alcohol in 97 liters of rakia or 325 liters of wine, which was essentially the same as consuming a third of a liter of rakia a day or almost an entire liter of wine daily, just to teach those Muslims a lesson. Because nothing says "F you, Muhammad" as dying from cirrhosis at age 30. As such, it was widely believed that the strongest and healthiest members of society were the heavy drinkers, and that sobriety was bad for their health, with large amounts of spirits regularly being given to children in the idea to better their health. By the time the Ottomans were finally fully kicked out of the Balkans in the early 1900s, after the First Balkan War, basically every house in the Ottoman-controlled Balkans had their own boiler for distilling their own rakia, as well as numerous secret family recipes passed down through generations. And the transfer of this knowledge played a major role in preserving local cultural identity. And so, rather than just being some booze that got you wasted, alcohol had become part of the Balkan social fabric itself, no matter your religion or nationality. A baby was born, shots to celebrate. You may as well dunk it and christen it with a bowl of rakia, as there will be so much liquor present to celebrate. Someone's getting married, better give them the finest rakia bottles possible, and of course, you'll need to bring barrels more for the guests to celebrate. Someone died, you'll leave rakia on their grave. Guests coming over, greet them with a glass the second they cross your doorstep. Guests leaving, give them a few shots for the road. Your kid has a splinter, dunk it in a shot of rakia. Sore throat, hot rakia with herbs, spices, and honey. Pneumonia, take a dried gallbladder from a pig, mix it with gunpowder, and drink it in a shot of rakia. All of these are actual traditions and practices, and I'm not exaggerating for one bit. Whether you receive good news, bad news, ambivalent news, whether you're happy, sad, bored, angry, alone, or in a crowd, every occasion was an occasion for rakia. And it's important to note that this isn't just for Christians. Even Balkan Muslims join in on the fun. Like everywhere else in the region, Muslim-majority Albania and Bosnia have a strong love for and take pride in their booze. Although, technically, the people from these countries embraced Islam, many only did so on a cultural rather than on a fundamental level, thus resulting in a much more liberal interpretation of the religion. It's also noteworthy to mention that one of the more popular schools of Islam in these countries was Sufism, which was considered a more liberal school and had laxer stances regarding what was haram. This, coupled with the extensive mixing of Muslim and Christian cultures in the countries, made alcohol much more socially acceptable and deeply connected to local tradition, which many Muslims outside the Balkans will find appalling and deeply heretical. Now, being that this is the Balkans, to the surprise of no one, there are countless slap fights between countries, with each insisting that only their ancient civilization was advanced enough to uncover the secrets behind getting drunk off of fermented fruit, while their barbarian feral neighbors were still swinging from trees and chucking feces at each other. However, right now, the oldest confirmed source of Rakia production does seem to come from Serbia in the mid-14th century, judging by its legal code that included punishments for those who drink too much hard liquor, which worked out great, didn't it? But having recently found some distillation vessels dating from the 11th century, Bulgaria insists that the Serbians are drunken liars, and instead they are the true inventors. But at the moment, these claims cannot be totally confirmed nor denied, as there is a lack of conclusive evidence. As much as alcohol has an important cultural and historic role in the Balkans, it's not to say it's not without its issues. On the one hand, you have the cultural traditions surrounding rituals and customs tracing back millennia. On the other, you have the very real problem of abuse of alcohol and the resulting social and health consequences that result from it. While reliable statistics are hard to come by, if you live in the Balkans, it's undeniable that Balkaners, Balkan men in particular, are major binge drinkers. Over half of Romanian adult males reported heavy drinking in the last month, by far the largest in the EU. At least 30% of Slovenians and Serbs binge drink monthly, whilst Bulgaria and Hungary have some of the highest regular alcohol consumption in Europe. A lot of this comes from poor living standards such as high unemployment, low wages, chain smoking, and unaddressed generational and/or mental trauma. As the killjoys at the World Health Organization love reminding us, there really isn't any safe amount of alcoholic drink, period, and it contributes to the development of over 200 serious medical disorders, such as numerous types of cancer, especially stomach and liver, stroke, heart disease, and cirrhosis, none of which Balkan healthcare systems are particularly good at providing long-term care for. And due to being extremely calorically dense, booze can really pack on the pounds, especially abdominal visceral fat, which is the worst kind because it squeezes your organs and contributes heavily to the diseases previously listed. Also, we cannot gloss over the fact that there isn't any single Balkaner watching this video who doesn't closely know a family torn apart by an alcoholic parent or has had to experience it themselves personally. And in a region that often still clings to the idea that trouble at home is a private family issue, more often than not, alcohol can play a very dark role behind the scenes in the home and in one's upbringing. There's a silver lining, however. In almost every country in the Balkans, daily alcohol use rates are quite a bit lower now than they were 20-30 years ago, with each subsequent generation regularly binge drinking much less than the one before it. All in all, here in the Balkans, alcohol brings out a certain zest and satisfaction in life, rarely seen or expressed in other activities. Sharing a drink and toast begins and strengthens camaraderie and reaffirms the social bonds between individuals and communities. This place may suck, but as long as we're enjoying Rakia together, it's the best place in the world. Bottoms up. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, give it a like and subscribe, and if you really did, become a member like these wonderful people. My name is Janos, and you've watched Living Ironically in Europe.
Hey, why